Thank you for that nice introduction. Yeah, and we have known each other a very long time.
Yes. I didn't realize quite how long until, it would have been about 2003, I think, was when I started at East Hampton. So it's been a while.
So it's very nice to see some of my Long Island friends and my new North Carolina genealogy group, who I've met only once, but here we are. So we're going to talk today about death records, and I'm going to keep this pretty state neutral because I know that we have people here. Well, even Long Islanders are also researching other states, and we have people here from other states researching states other than North Carolina. So I've tried to keep it somewhat generic so that everybody can benefit from this presentation. So this is one of Benjamin Franklin's famous quotes: "Nothing could be certain except death and taxes." So we know that death is certain, but as genealogists, sometimes our problem is, when did it happen? Where did it happen? What happened to the remains of the person? Are they buried, cremated, where? Finding gravestones, and all kinds of other things associated with death. So we know it's there. The challenge is sometimes finding it. All right, so one of the main groups of records that genealogists use are the vital records. And those vital records are relate to birth, marriage, and what's of concern to us here is death. Now, in each of these categories, you'll see that I've talked about primary and secondary information. So primary information is generally information that's provided by the person who the record is about. Now, in birth certificates, although we consider that primary information, clearly a newborn infant cannot provide the information. And in death certificates, we have the opposite end. Clearly, the deceased cannot provide the information for their own death certificate. And so death certificates of birth, marriage, and death certificates are the ones that are the most likely to contain errors. And that's for several reasons. On the personal information side, which is secondary information, somebody else has provided it. The person who is providing it, that information, is generally someone who is emotionally impacted by the deceased. It could be a parent, a child, just somebody very close. And so that emotion gets in the way of providing accurate information, and that's why it's less reliable. The medical certification that's on a death certificate is considered primary information, and that's because a doctor is saying what happened on a certain day at a certain time. Also, the burial information, the undertaker or the funeral home, and the place of burial is considered primary information because the people who are in charge of that are filling it out. Now, I know that there are many times when a death certificate will say a person is buried somewhere and then they're not, or they can't be located in a particular cemetery. But that could be for any number of reasons, like the person being reburied and transported to another location. That's certainly at least one possibility. But we're gonna take a look at various other records that support learning more about a person's death. And I just want to point out that when it comes to obituaries and death notices, sometimes we can find out good information about the person we're researching by researching that person's relatives, siblings, parents, sometimes even nieces, nephews, cousins, all, the people who are likely to be mentioned in an obituary or in a death notice. And we're going to, what I'm going to do is go through a few records in various categories, and then we're going to do two short case studies that use all these records. And hopefully you'll be getting some ideas and thoughts about researching. So I just am using New York State law as an example because the Middle Country Library is in New York State. But every state, and we have 50 of them, death certificates come under state and not federal regulation law. So therefore, you have to research what's available and when the laws when the law was passed that formalized death certificates, and not every state is the same. So you have to research the regulations for each state, and sometimes counties within a state kept them before the state regulation. It's all different, and you've got to research. One of the really nice places to do that are the family search wikis, and all you have to do is just Google wiki, the state, and death, and something should pop up. You can also go into the state websites, and they will also provide you with the information. Okay, another way to find out what's available online, and I just used Ancestry.com as an example. I went into the card catalog, and so you don't have to go in and just search for a person. If you go under the search tab on any of the big websites, an option should be their catalog. And in this example, all I entered in the search field was New York death, and this was the list of results. So this is telling me what indexes, what abstracts, what obituaries are available for New York State in any given set of years. New York State, anything related to death. You should also do a similar catalog search for infamilysearch.org. And those results are so extensive, I couldn't even take a reasonable screenshot to put up for you. And the same in MyHeritage. In other words, the big three: Ancestry, Family Search, and MyHeritage. Sometimes their records overlap, but sometimes one has a set of records that the other doesn't have. So don't limit yourself. And all of these should be available for free in local public libraries. Ancestry is normally subscription. It's available free in most public libraries. Family Search is available free from any place you can get an internet connection in your home. MyHeritage is also a subscription. And Marlene, if I'm remembering correctly, I think Middle Country now has a library subscription to MyHeritage. I think they've started that recently, like Ancestry. I'm not too sure how widely available that is, but it does exist. I also want you to make aware, if you're not already, of the organization reclaimtherecords.org. This organization was started by Brookshire Gans, a genealogist. And basically what her organization does is they sue various states or localities to access death records that are supposed to be public but are not. So every state has a range of years that where their indexes or their records should be made public, but they don't always comply or keep up with the need. And so basically they take the states to court, and they have been highly successful in winning cases. So this is just a screenshot of the home page, but I suggest you go on reclaimtherecords.org, because if you're not finding something that's already there, it may be coming soon, because there is a legal case against whatever state. All right, this is an example of how the way we search and what we find can be very confusing. If we were live, if we were in person, I would ask the question, does anyone know who Benjamin Siegel is? But first I'm going to tell you about Benjamin Siegel, and then I'll tell you who he is, because you will all know. So on the top photograph is his gravestone in the Hollywood Forever Mausoleum, which is in Hollywood, California. The photo on the bottom shows him together with his father, Max Siegel, in the, these are memorial plaques, which are very common in synagogues, where, people put up plaques memorializing the deceased. It's not a burial, it's just a memorial plaque. And this one is in the Bialystoker Synagogue, which is in downtown Manhattan. So why is Benjamin Siegel buried in California and memorialized in New York? Well, Benjamin Siegel is, better as Bugsy Siegel of the of organized crime in the early days of Las Vegas. And basically he was buried in California. However, his roots are in New York. And as a youngster, he attended this synagogue with his father, Max, and a memorial plaque was therefore put up for him in New York. So here we find the records and information about a person in literally opposite sides of the country. And actually it's the plaque in New York that provides more information, because although I know most of you can't read the Hebrew, it's basically his Hebrew name and son of his father's name in Hebrew, and the death date with on the Jewish calendar, which would enable further research. So it's actually the memorial plaque that's giving better information than the gravestone. Okay, here we have a death certificate for Rose DeLendy, and I'm sure most of you do not know who Rose DeLendy is, although many of you probably know who her son is. What's significant about this particular death certificate is her cause of death: exhaustion following prolonged excitement. And when I first saw this in the earlier days of my research, I thought it was because she was upset about who her son was. Her son was Frank Nitti, who was Al Capone's right-hand man. But exhaustion following paralyzed excitement is the cause of death of manic depression. So she was manic depressed, and she died in Kings Park State Hospital, which is a psychiatric hospital on Long Island. However, she's not buried in the hospital grounds. So here we see that she died in Suffolk County, Kings Park. But she's buried, the family buried her in the Holy Cross Cemetery, which is also on Long Island. And here we have also the name of the undertaker, William H. Clayton. Now the Clayton Funeral Home still exists in Kings Park, or at least it did when I found this death certificate. And I did call them to see if they had any further records. The date of this death, of the burial, is 1915, which is rather early, and they did not have good records. But you could always try calling a funeral home for additional records. Now, unfortunately, the funeral home industry is changing dramatically. Traditionally, the funeral home business was a family business and very often passed down from father to, it passed down from one generation to the next. I don't want to say strictly father, son, but from one generation to the next, a family business. Now, today, funeral homes are being bought up by larger corporations. And when they come in, what is the first thing that they do? They get rid of the records. And so it might not be quite the resource that it used to be, but it's always worth a try. Okay, this is my great-grandfather's death certificate, Solomon Solodowksy. And again, I just use this as an example of where the right, I'm not going to say right, left, because we don't see it the same, but this side that I've highlighted is completely filled out by the physician at the time of his death, cause of death, and so on. And then at the bottom, we have his burial, and we have the undertaker and the undertaker's address, the date. All of that is primary information. The other side is information that's provided by a family member. Now, on this particular record, it does not ask who the informant is. So we don't know. He had 9 children, and any one of them could have been the informant. We just don't know that. So clearly, they didn't have an exact birth date. His occupation, it said Hebrew teacher. He's born in that really small country called Russia. We have some parent names, but we don't know who provided the information, and that's always a problem. Okay, now cemetery research is really important. And the example that I'm giving relates to Jewish cemeteries, but in many ways it applies to any cemetery. You always want to try to go to the cemetery and locate a gravestone. Now, I know that so much has become available on Find a Grave, and people are thrilled and they see the gravestone. But what you don't see on Find a Grave or Billion Graves or any other gravestone website is the context that that gravestone is in. You don't see the people who are buried around that person. You don't see a whole family plot. And very often you can pick up additional family members. And in many cases, in many nationalities and ethnicities, there's actually, if there's a family plot, you could have one generation in one row, the next generation in another row, and even a third generation. So the layout of the plot helps you, again, it's almost like a family, it can be almost like a family tree. So this is my great-grandfather's gravestone, Solomon Solodowksy. You saw it written, however, on his stone, his name is written as Solodowksy, which is the name that was in Russia, and on his passenger manifest, beginning with a CH as opposed to an S. When they came to the United States, the CH became an S because in English, we don't as much as we would use an S. And so that was changed right away. The other thing that's critical, aside from his Hebrew name, and I'm not going to go into all that, is the fact that there is this symbol of a pitcher. And symbol of a pitcher is relates to Jewish religious tribe. Some of you might be familiar with the Kohen. I don't have a slide of this because this is not a Jewish talk, but you might have seen hands that look like this. If you can look at my picture, I'm holding up with the split fingers, and that's kind of one ancient religious tribe, and this picture symbolizes the Levites, which is another. It's a patrilineal descendant, father to son, father to son, father to son. Women don't count in this at all, and I'm not even going to comment on that. But what happened was I saw this gravestone and I thought of this Abraham Onor, and I thought that he might be somewhere in that line. And it was amazing because when I snapped this picture, this was I'll never forget this day. It was a summer, summer thunderstorms, when it thunders and lightnings, but the sun is shining. You can see in the background of this, you can see in the background of this picture, the sky is blue. And when I snapped the picture, there was a lightning bolt. And basically on this gravestone are the hands. You can't really see them well, but that lightning bolt was telling me in no way was that man related to my great-grandfather, because it would be impossible that one would have the hands and one would have the picture. On the right-hand side, we see now, this is my grandfather's, this is my grandfather's gravestone, the son of Solomon, and he has, it's much smaller, but there is a picture there. And so again, getting to know the ethnic intricacies or distinctions of gravestone and burial practices can be very important in helping to solve problems. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the real problem of when I tried to find my great-grandfather's burial information. So I had learned from the census record that he came to this country, which I never knew when I started my research. This was long before everything was online, and I was going through microfilm at the Family History Library, and I kept coming across this over the course of about a year. He was in the 1920 census. He was 52 years old. He could have died the next day. He could have lived another 30 years. I had no idea. So I was going through year by year by year. I know it's hard to see, but in the microfilm, I kept coming across the Solomon Solodowksy, the only one, age 6. Now, someone who dies at age 6, they can't possibly be my great-grandfather. But after a lot of negative searches, I said, I've got to find out who this kid is. Maybe it's somebody else who was named after him. So I sent for the death certificate, which is what you just saw 2 slides ago. And on the death certificate, he is age 66. So what happened was, on this typed index, in the olden days, in the days of typewriters, the key got stuck on the second 6 or somehow didn't print. And so he came out on the death index as age 6, as opposed to 66 on his gravestone. Then what happened was the Italian genealogy group on Long Island transcribed the indexes, put it up online, and he was originally online as a 6-year-old. And I called my friend John Martino at the time, who headed up this project, and I said, you've got to fix this. He was not 6, he was 66. So now he shows up as 66 in the online indexes. And then, which I'm sure you don't remember, but go back to the gravestone, and there he is 62 years old. So which is it? So it took, and my analysis of what's of his birth year is another whole talk and evidence analysis, and I'm not going to go into it. But at this point, I just want to show you that there could be conflicts, how these kinds of errors do occur, and how you really have to investigate things by looking at all possible records. All right, so again, here we are. Here's a picture of my great-grandfather. And the reason I have this screenshot is that it's a beautiful example of how you get different information from searching on different genealogy websites. So Ancestry, which for a lot of people is the go-to place, we have his, and that's this one here. And I'm trying not to say left and right. We have his name, about his birth year. So we have this information, but it gives the certificate number to get the actual record. This is just an index. On Family Search, however, they give you more information on their index. So I did the same search, Solomon Solodowksy, except they have it indexed as Solodowksy, but it still came up. Now what's different and what makes it a better search for us is that it does give the marital status. Here it said unknown, but it also gives the parents' names. And particularly if you're searching for someone with a common name, it can be extremely helpful to know the parents' names before you actually spend the money going to get the actual death certificate. And with that comment, I'm going to say never, ever, ever, ever stop at the index. If you find somebody in an index, which is what you see on these slides, you should always try to obtain the actual death certificate, because there could be mistakes on the indexing. And we just saw that with that 6-year-old, 66-year-old issue. Okay, so indexes on different sites make a difference. That's the bottom line. Now, I just want to add on familysearch.org. So on the quick index that they give you, what is not here that Ancestry does have more obviously is the certificate number, so that when you go to get the index, it's the actual record, it's very helpful to have the certificate number. It is on Family Search. I don't have a full screenshot here, but over on the right, there's something that says additional information, and you click on the thing and you will find the certificate number there also. But you have to dig a little deeper on Family Search for that piece of information. However, use both and just maximize what you can learn before spending the money to actually get the death certificate. All right, here's another similar example of the same issue. This is these are the Social Security records for my father, Irving Salowe, and how it comes up on different websites and the different kinds of information you can get related to the Social Security Death Index. Now, I do want to make the point, because some people are always concerned about the fact that the Social Security number is revealed, but once a person is deceased, that number is no longer valid, and there's no such thing as identity theft of the deceased person. So there's really no need to worry. Can someone falsely use it? Yeah, but can it impact my father? Absolutely not, clearly. All right, so on, I don't want to say left and right, I'm so tempted to do that. So here we have the Social Security Application and Claims Index, which is on Ancestry. And it gives us alternate names, the initial plus his full name, basic demographics, birth date, parents' names, death date, and also, alternate names in various records. Okay. Now, from the Social Security Application Index, what you can do is send for what's known as the SS5. And the SS5 is the application for Social Security that the person themselves filled out. So this is entirely primary information. And it's a little more costly. It's the last time I ordered one, I believe it was $22 a record. It has the person's signature. So again, if you're researching someone with a common name, sometimes having that signature distinguishes one John Smith from another John Smith. It also gives occupation, the date the Social Security application was filled out, and the other thing that it provides, if you don't have it from another source, is mother's maiden name. And other than the sentimentality of it, that's one of the primary reasons for ordering an SS5. The information for ordering the SS5 is on the Ancestry site. When you find a person, there's another place to click. Now, the Social Security Death Index is a different set of records by Social Security. So on Ancestry, which is here, we get his name, again, birth date, death date, Social Security number. And on FamilySearch.org, we have pretty much the same information. The format is a little bit different. In both of them, we learned that the Social Security was taken out in New York State. So again, if you have someone who's moved around the country a lot, that can be very helpful. In getting Social Security information, always be aware that the Social Security Act was not passed until 1935. So if somebody died before 1935, they are not going to be eligible, clearly. Well, if somebody was born before 1935, they could certainly be in the Social Security Death Index. But if they died before 1935, they are not going to be in the Social Security Index. And the indexes that are online generally start with death years in the 1960s, because that's when Social Security started computerizing their records. Okay. All right, so another source of death information is from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So if people requested a military gravestone, as was the case for my father, you can go, and this is from Ancestry. It might be available on other sites, but I do know that Ancestry has it. And the other nice thing about getting this Veterans Affairs record is not only do we have information we know from other sources, but it tells us that he was in the Army. It has his enlistment date and it has his release date. So again, we're getting a little bit of extra information about the person. Okay, so we say something is true if it's carved in stone, but that is not always true when it comes to a gravestone. So this is my great aunt, Gussie Pomerantz, my grandmother's sister. And according to her granddaughter, that's where the quote is from, the engraver made an error and mixed up the day with the birth year. She was born on February 10th, 1902, and they have February 2nd, 1910, and they were aware of that. Why was it not changed? Because it's very expensive to make a change in a gravestone. And so generally, if a mistake is made, people don't do it. They don't make the change. However, just to complicate things a little bit, in my research in the town, where she was born, which was in Orla. Today, that's in Belarus. When she was born, it was part of the Russian Empire. And I found her birth record, and her birth record says she was born on July 11th, 1898. So something is clearly amiss, and we haven't quite gotten to the bottom of it. It's possible that she made herself younger when she came to this country. And but again, you've got to look at all records and try to find and make sense of the truth of it all. And the last record I'm going to show you before I begin my case studies is an example of a probate record. So this is the probate record of my other great-grandfather, Moses Kotlowitz. And in his probate record, you know, it's always cute and fun to know who he left money and how much money he left to who, and all of that kind of the soap opera stuff that goes on in families. But in the probate record, they also ask for the name, the relationship, and the address of all of the deceased's children, spouses, grandchildren, and so on. So this is just an example of what we have here and how it can be helpful. So Moses Kotlowitz, my great-grandfather, this is the list of his children. We have sons and daughters. Now, what's significant here is that all the daughters were married and have different married surnames, obviously. So again, if you don't know a married woman's name, you might want to look at or try to find the probate record of her father. And these are the addresses at the time of he died in 1933. These are their addresses in 1933 at the time his will was probated. And this was found in Brooklyn in the Kings County probate record room. Okay, but every county, usually probate records are held at the county level, at least in New York they are. All right, so this is going to be case study number 1. So this is the story of Dora Potofsky. Dora Potofsky is the woman in this picture, and she was my grandfather's sister. And this is her daughter this is her daughter Rebecca, and this is her daughter Bertha. So one of the big issues in this family, well, aside from researching Dora, the daughter Rebecca was the one of 182 descendants of my great-grandfather. Rebecca was the only one I couldn't find. And she was the subject of a very major 25-year research project, which is another whole talk I call Gone Girl. But this, I'm going to just give you this little piece about her mother, which talks about some of the, I guess, psychosocial problems in the family. So the oral history of that I received from my grandmother, who used to say that Dora took a walk into the Passaic River. She never said she attempted suicide. She never said anything ugly other than she took a walk into the Passaic River, which I think was just a way of softening a suicide attempt, a way of wording it. I knew this happened in Newark, New Jersey. I had requested a newspaper search about it, and I got back an article that said she attempted suicide in 1946. When I did a newspaper search in person, I located 2 articles with different information, and I visited the site. So now I'm going to show you some of this detail. So this is the newspaper article when I requested the Newark Public Library to do a search for me. And what they found was this record in 1946 that, yes, she did take a walk into the Passaic River, but she was saved. Well, it didn't say she took a walk. She was found floating at the Passaic River, and somebody tending their boat on a dock found her and pulled her out of the water. And at the very bottom, it says, police reported she was unable to explain how she got into the river. All right, so we don't know if she purposely went in, if she fell in. We don't know from this article. So I went to the maps and I wanted to see where did she live in relation to where she was pulled out of the river, which was described in the article. And again, it's nice to do map work to kind of help you put a story into perspective. So I found a historical map of Newark, and this is a current, on this side, we have a current map from, I guess this is from Google Maps. I did this, and this is the historic record. And you could see from where she lived to the river was not a far distance. She easily could have walked over there. And we can see how far down the river she floated before she was pulled out. It's also interesting to note, because I actually did this drive, you'll see this in a couple of pictures, that on the current map, there's a highway here, and it's very hard to get down to this dock. It's almost like a dirt road. The dock is now, it's old and there's nothing going on there. It's kind of falling apart. But at the time, while there was a roadway, it doesn't appear to have been too much of a major highway that it is today. Okay, now in 1947, about a year later, we have the two newspaper articles, which I found by doing my own research. I went to the New York Public Library because the Newark newspapers are not online, or at least they were not. I don't think they're online yet, but they certainly weren't online when I was doing this research. Now, this was front page news on both newspapers, the Newark Star Ledger and the Newark Evening News, on the day of her death. So it was a center article on the front page with very parallel headlines about a woman dying in a plunge. Now, what is a plunge? Does a plunge mean she fell? Or does a plunge mean she jumped? Or does a plunge mean she was pushed? It's a plunge, it's a fall. Okay. So the one newspaper here has her name as Potofsky, totally incorrect. Here it has the correct Potofsky. Here it says she just missed striking children at play, and she came within a few inches of falling on Barbara Conroy, age 7. Within a few inches. So that would mean she fell like literally in front of this child. Here it says, she missed a 7.5-year-old by about 6 feet. Well, it would still be pretty traumatic for a 7-year-old, but 6 feet is different than a few inches. Okay, and then this article names the daughter Betty, and Betty, Rebecca, the daughter who I've been looking for, started to use the name Betty at one point. So here we have the daughter Bertha, and she has another daughter, Betty. So I knew that by the time of her death in 1947, Rebecca was using the name Betty. So this gave me not only there's a lot going on here in these two articles. First of all, If something is in two newspapers, if the town has two newspapers that you're searching for an obituary, don't stop at one, look at the other, because it's the contradictory information here is really outstanding. And the one article, the one obituary or news article, it's not really an obituary, it's a news article, has the other daughter's name in it. And that's another thing. If somebody died in something that's news, in a manner that's newsworthy. So in this case, she plunged from the roof of a building, of a 3-story building. They both say it's a 3-story apartment house. But if somebody died in a fire, or somebody died as a result of some kind of accident, or something that would be newsworthy, always check the news articles in addition to looking for an obituary. Okay, so I actually went to Newark, New Jersey. I mean, I was never, I knew Bertha. I never knew Dora. I did know the daughter Bertha. I did not know the sister, Rebecca Betty, who I was looking for. But here's the apartment house. And you can see it's 3 stories, and she fell from the roof, and the articles described a courtyard, and it's a corner building. So there were 2 courtyards, and I'm not exactly sure where this happened, but I was there on a snowy day, or snow melting day, obviously. But I did kind of, try to recreate the information that I had in the news article. All right, so was her death a suicide? Now, if it was a suicide, you would think that there would be an autopsy, a coroner's report, a police record. There would be something related to a woman dying, falling off a roof. And all of my inquiries led to nothing. I couldn't get a police report. There wasn't a coroner's report. And in the Jewish religion, burial is supposed to occur within 24 hours of the death. And she was indeed buried. This is her gravestone. She died on June 23rd. We have that from the newspaper articles, and she was buried the next day. And that implies that maybe it was not suicide, because that so kind of confirms that there wouldn't have been an autopsy, there wouldn't have been some kind of police investigation, because all of those kinds of things would have delayed a burial. So that's where my information stood for quite some time. Also, the family, she belonged to a benevolent society, which many ethnicities had. And so I went into the minutes of the society, which are held at the Evo Institute in New York, and to see if there was something there. And I just found the minutes page where they acknowledged her passing, but there wasn't any particular information there. I'm just showing this to you as just another way of possibly researching the person. And then I found her death certificate, and that was where I had my shocking realization that she died. Her cause of death was suicide by jumping off roof at house. And so the death certificate clearly says it was suicide. One of the reasons that I had a problem finding the death certificate was they messed up her surname. It's not Potofsky, it's Potofsky. So the O is an E and the I is a Y, and it wasn't coming up in indexes. But again, I did research in person at the New Jersey State Archives, and that is where I found this. And so now I know that she she perished at her own hand. Okay, now going to, so that's Dora's story. Now I was doing all this for Dora because I really wanted to find her daughter, Betty. So I went to the Essex County courthouse to find probate records to see if there was a record for either her father, Lewis, who had predeceased all this, or Dora. Well, Dora, there wouldn't, anyway, there was nothing for Dora, but I did find her husband, Lewis, who had predeceased her. And in this probate record, I found a notarized page by Betty Dixon. So here we have the daughter Betty, and now for the first time, I had her married name as Dixon. And I knew that she was living in California in the Los Angeles County because that's where she had this document notarized. And here we have it again, and we have the date of that it was notarized. We have her signature and her surname. So again, looking for a probate record of an associated person, of your subject person, is where the information was revealed. Now, in my search for Betty Rebecca Dixon, I had searched California death records umpteen times. And I actually once looked at her death certificate and did not identify it as her because it was full of misinformation. So her mother, we know, committed suicide. One of the reasons that she was despondent was that her daughter, Betty, ran away from home with a Navy man and had a son. That's the oral history that I was going on. And basically, she abandoned her family. There was one instance where maybe she went to a great aunt in Atlanta, but other than that, her family had absolutely she had no contact with her family. And when she married her husband, she never talked about her family. She just didn't talk about her family. She lied about her birth date. She lied about her birthplace. She was absolutely, definitely born in Odessa, Russia, unquestionably. I have her birth record. She said her birthplace was in New Jersey. She was born in 1912. She used 1917. The name and birthplace of her father, she knew her father was born in Russia, and she gave her maiden name, and this is what threw me off, as Masters. And I'm going to give credit to my new cousin, Andrea Dixon, who I know is on this call. She was the person who made the connection that Masters was the name of her father's dry cleaning store. It was Masters Dry Cleaning. And she just pulled off that name, Masters, and used it as her maiden name. So as crazy as it is, there was a connection. The maiden name and birthplace of her mother, on her death certificate, it's unknown. She knew it, but she never told anybody. She never acknowledged it. And the key to my knowing that even though every bit of information on here was wrong, the key to my identifying that she was my Rebecca Potofsky was her social security number. Because what I did was well, let me just quickly say that this picture is what connected me to her family, because Andrea Dixon, who's on this call, put that picture in her ancestry family tree. We had a DNA match. Everything in Andrea's tree was unknown or wrong because this was the information she knew. But when I went into that tree, I saw that picture and I recognized that picture because I have a copy of it from my family. And so it wasn't any kind of fancy anything. It was the picture that connected us. However, I still, what do they say for carpenters? Measure twice and cut once. So I was going to double sure I had that social security number, and I got her social security, her SS5, and everything was a match. And that's the story. Okay, so now I'm going to do case study number 2. And this is not personal research, but research I did. And I was hoping my friend Diane, well, maybe she joined, she came in after we started. But this goes back to 2013 research when I was working at Dowling College, and the Long Island people know Dowling College, and it closed in 2016. But the administration building of the college was a Vanderbilt mansion, and you see that picture up in the corner. And my friend Diane was the archivist for the college, and she did a lot of research on the building and the Vanderbilt family. And we did a lot of collaboration with good working buddies. Anyway, she sent me this email in 2013, and she said what she's looking for is the date that this Muriel Vanderbilt Church Phelps Adams. So we've got 3 marriages there. She was trying to find the date she became a widow. Gave me the information that she married John Payson Adams in 1944, and they were living in California. And where is he buried? And this is just from the email, and this is all the information I had. She knows the family, but I don't. And so I took this on as a challenge, and I'm going to show you how I handled it. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to confirm that they were married in 1944, like she said, and I found the marriage announcement. And again, it was a 2-column thing. It gave a lot of detail. And from here, I learned his parents' name. I learned where he went to school, and that he was stationed, that he was in the Navy, and he was a doctor in the medical corps. And I learned about her, and that her previous marriages to Mr. Church and Mr. Phelps ended in divorce. So therefore, of her 3 marriages that I learned about in the email, I know that her last marriage was to Adams, to John Adams, which, by the way, is not exactly an easy name to research because it's so common. Just to add a little fun to this. So I wanted to know more about him and how I could find his burial place, his death record. That's what she wanted to know. So I went and found him in every logical census that I could. I knew that they were from California. And the biggest learning that I had from the census records was that his mother's middle initial was L, which was consistent across 2 census records. And again, I looked in every possible available census record for this family, and I did find them. I learned a little bit more about where they lived and what states they lived in and so on. All right, I located a birth index for a John P. Adams with a birth date. The mother's maiden name, it said Lee. Now remember, I saw that L on the census records, but I didn't know if that was a maiden name or a middle name. The implication is that it's a middle name. And so that was this was a possible match. I'm showing you the logic of my research here. And they did live in Alameda County in California in all those census records. So this seemed like a pretty strong possibility. I went to the Social Security Death Index and I found a John Adams with the same birth date. Now I've picked up a Social Security number and I found a death date in 1985. So I'm getting closer to answering her question of where he died. It said last place of residence was in Florida with a zip code. So that narrows down the state of Florida. And I'm getting closer to finding out where he died and is buried. Okay, now I found her death. Well, this was an article rather than an obituary. And it says that this is in 1972. We have him dying in 1985. So Mrs. Adams, the widow, it has her as a widow, implying that her husband predeceased her, had been married twice before. It confirms all that those marriages ended in divorce. So I sent this obituary to my friend Diane, and her answer was, this can't be the guy I'm looking for. He predeceased Muriel, according to her 1972 obit in the New York Times. And that's how we read it. She is the widow. So he would have had to have died before 1972, but we just saw that he died in 1985. So what's going on here? Well, I found another article in the Newport Daily News that she divorced him in 1958. So she was not his widow. She was his divorcee, I guess, but the Times reported it as a widow, and that threw everything off. So again, just because it's in print does not mean that it's true. They were divorced. She was not his widow. So I went to check this out a little more. Now, Florida, an increasing number of counties have their records online, but Florida was the leader of the pack. And I would say most county records are online for Florida. If you just go into their county clerk's office, you can get into screens that will give you these kinds of records. And I learned here that this was something that occurred. You can find deeds, you can find probate records. Some things are personal and not publicly available, but there's a lot that's publicly available that can help you to do further research. And we knew that his lawyer was Cornelius Moore. That was in the divorce article. So I knew that I had the right person here. Okay, now when I say search for related people, so I found using that Lee name as the maiden name, I found this wedding announcement for Hamilton Lee, who is John Adams' mother's brother, Hamilton Lee. So it was his uncle. But here it was this article. What this article did was confirm to me that his mother's maiden name was Lee. Now, Lee could be a middle name as well as a surname. You know, it's one of those names that can kind of work any way. And then I found, and unfortunately, I don't have the source anymore, but this was from some online military thing that I found. We knew he was in the Navy. It was probably in some Navy database. And I apologize that I didn't keep a good record for myself. But what we see here is we have the matching social security number to that death record that I found. We have his name and we have his birth year, 06. This column is year of birth. It's a little blurry, but that matches that social security, that California birth index that I found. And so it took all of these pieces to put together that I was following the right person. Once my friend told me it can't be, but it is. It was that New York Times article that described her as a widow that was wrong. And so again, just to show you my proof here, the connection was the social security number to John Peyton Adams. Here we have the social security number here, and with the mother's maiden name Lee, which connected in other articles and in other ways. And that's how I proved that I had the right deceased John Adams. And you can see he's listed as John Adams. I mean, I don't have to tell you how many John Adams would come up in a general search. Okay, and again, I just offer this to you as another resource. One of the articles said that he attended McGill University, that's in Canada, Montreal, and they have a very extensive alumni website, which again, if I was doing further research into John Payson Adams, that I would, I'd have all of this nice military information for him. Okay, so the remaining mysteries. So where did John Payson Adams die? Well, his burial is in Find a Grave, and he is buried in Mountain View Cemetery in Alameda County, California, with the rest of his family, but that doesn't mean he died there. So I called the cemetery, and they told me that he died in North, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Situate, Rhode Island, according to the cemetery. And that does make sense because they did have a house in Newport. There was an article in the Newport, Rhode Island newspapers. So it does make sense. So as I told you before, the next step would always be to get the death certificate. However, in Rhode Island, and maybe this is going to be on one of Reclaim the Records lawsuits, the death records 50 years or older are considered public information and could be obtained from the city hall or town hall where the event happened, and or through the Rhode Island State Archives. But I can tell you that Rhode Island does not make their information public. So I went to all the major websites, I did searches, and it's not publicly available easily. I would have to actually go to the town, and when you go on the websites, they tell you you have to be a direct descendant to get the record. Well, if it's public, then you don't have to be a direct descendant. So I just smell a Rhode Island lawsuit in their future from Reclaim the Records. So I never did get the death certificate, but this is as close as I've been able to come. So I just, as a professional genealogist, I always want to provide a slide with the genealogical proof standard, that in solving a problem, you've done reasonably exhaustive research. I think in my 2 case studies, you can see that that was done, and exhaustive does not mean the same as exhausting. All research is exhausting, but exhaustive means that you've checked out all your sources. You've cited them. Well, I messed up the one military one pretty badly here, but I did have citations on most of my slides. Correlated the information. I think in both case studies, you can see that that was done. resolve conflicting evidence. There was conflicting evidence in both of case studies, and that I've presented my conclusion, hopefully coherently to you. And so searching puts us at our wits' end, and I leave with a little sense of humor that we've reached a dead end. And I always have to do a quick commercial for my book that I did with the Jewish Genealogy Society of Long Island. It's available on Amazon. And I thank you all for your time. And Marlene, I'm happy to take questions.
Sure. Did anybody have any questions? I didn't see anything up on the chat just yet, but I did put in that our library YouTube page is mcpl.tv, and we should have this program, like I said, hopefully today or tomorrow, we'll have it posted up there. Does anybody have any questions? I know Rhoda gave us a lot to work with and to think about. Anybody? I'll give everybody a couple of minutes.
This is Cheryl. I just have one quick question. Could she go over the name of her book again?
Oh, sure.
I wasn't fast enough to write it down.
We do have a question from Andrea. Is your family history in the Long Island book that you wrote?
No, my family history isn't in it, but there are 3 of my family pictures in it.
Oh, nice. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? We are planning our, Rhoda, I'll have to reach out to you. We are planning our August and September programs. So I'll email you this week or next week, and we'll certainly get you back for some more virtual programs all the way from North Carolina.
Zoom makes it easy.
It does, isn't it? It's like, it's a bad thing and a good thing. But that's great.
I hope I haven't stunned everybody into silence.
No. Probably just gave them a lot to think about.
This is Annette Mann. Rhoda,
Yes.
I know you said it's exhaustive, not exhausting, but how long have you been doing this?
Well, I've been doing genealogy research since 1993. So I've been doing this a long time, and I was certified in 1998. So
Thank you.
Math.
Thank you.
Heather asked, my uncle died in the 1980s and I went to the town and was told that I cannot have access to his death certificate. I told them I just want to find out where he is.
Yeah, they have privacy rules, and I have to tell you that the town clerks, where was this? What municipality?
Heather, if you'd like, you can certainly unmute
This was
yourself.
the town of Islip. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, town of Islip.
Oh,
I had lost my entire family in 2018. And what I started was a tradition of going to the graves here on Long Island for the holidays, like Christmas, Easter, and such, and the birthdays, and putting flowers on their graves and spending a little bit of time at the cemeteries, because like I say, I have no family, not on either side. So I couldn't find my uncle. I remember he died when I was quite young, maybe in my 20s, back in the 1980s. So I called the town essentially, and visited with them over the phone. And they said, I'm sorry, it's not 50 years. And I told them, I said, I'm his niece. All I wanted to find out is where he's located so I can put some flowers there if he's, somewhere around where I can reach him. And they wanted nothing to do with me. They said, well, you can contact the state, but they're probably not going to help you.
I can tell you that the town of Islip is very, very tough to work with. Just from my own experience with the town. And the state, don't forget it. you won't get anywhere with the state. They're right about that. The state is really, Albany takes forever to respond. And I would say to go into the town of Islip in person and verify that his descendants are deceased, or did he have any children who might be living who?
They're alive. They're my cousins. Yeah, they're my
Well,
cousins,
they
but
can
there's no
probably-
communication,
They
so I
can,
can't.
oh, you don't have any communication with them?
No,
Oh.
that side of the family walked off. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I mean, if you could have, I mean, they could legitimately request a copy of their father's death certificate. But
Yeah, I have
not-
nothing to
not-
do with
not
them.
as a-
Yeah.
Not as a niece, unfortunately. It's pretty sad to say.
Mhm.
And now you,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, I'm sorry. And the town of Islip is difficult to deal with.
I had another question for you too. When my dad died, my mother was estranged from him and I had no legal rights. I was the executrix of his estate. I was the person who had his healthcare proxy and so on. When it came to when he died, I had nothing. I couldn't follow out his wishes. They said, you have no rights. You'll go to jail. So my attorney said, go to another funeral home. They told me the same thing. What I found is I tried to get a copy of my father's death certificate. When I left him in the hospital when he died, I didn't know where he was until 9 months later. I was not allowed to know. Well, I went to the town of Smithtown where he died, and I requested his death certificate. And they turned around and said to me, well, who are you? And I told them I was his daughter. So I had to fill out all information about my father. And they said, well, we're going to need your birth certificate. I said, well, I was born in the town of, in Centereach, but I was born in Smithtown General Hospital. So I said that record is right there. I said, well, you have to do is pull my record. So when they pulled my record and they looked at the information that I gave them about my father and what he died of, they pulled my father's record and they said, who filled out your father's death certificate? Who is, and they mentioned my estranged mother's name. She guessed on my father's death certificate to the point where the information's not correct. So I said to the town, I said, can I correct that information? They said, very strange, and what the doctor put down he died of is not. I mean, they essentially, what they did, and they got away with it legally, is they overdosed him on antibiotic fluid, killed him on that, and they wrote down he had sepsis. My dad never had sepsis.
Mm,
There's nothing I could do legally about any of this.
Wow. That's
But
quite,
his death certificate's wrong. I mean, she guessed on it.
yeah. And unfortunately, that has legal implications for you. But that's kind of like Betty Dixon's death certificate. There wasn't anything on there that was accurate.
Mm.
And I guess the big difference there is that there wasn't any legal reason why it needed to be changed, other than the fact that that her new family couldn't connect with the old family, and we did that through DNA. But I don't know. I mean, if the legal entities are telling you that you can't do anything, I don't know that you can go beyond that, other than some major lawsuit.
Mm.
I don't know if you want to get involved.
Yeah.
Um,
Too much money there. I'm still fighting his estate stuff with the other half,
yeah,
all the legal stuff.
yeah.
It's terrible what they
I
get
feel
away
for
with.
you. I really do feel for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for all your information. I found it very interesting.
Thank you.
And Andrea has a
Thank you.
question. How do you order Social Security information? Is it the same as requesting a death certificate by contacting the state's vital records?
No, the SS5 you have to get from the Social Security Administration. And I believe on the major websites, there is a link that gives you the address. It's an address, I don't have it at my fingertips, but it's the Social Security Administration, I believe, in an office in Maryland. You can just Google how to order an SS5. You can do it online. But
Hey,
SS
Rhoda, it's Andrea. Hi, how are
Hi,
you?
Andrea.
I was gonna ask one other question. Should we be changing Betty Dixon's death certificate? I never even thought about it.
Should we be changing it? I never thought about it either. I've never heard of changing a death certificate. I know there could be corrections made on birth certificates. Birth certificates I know have been amended. I don't know if you can amend a death certificate. I've never come across that. I don't know. Does it matter? We found each other. We know the information.
Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't.
It's kind of become a funny story as opposed to a tragic story.
Right. I know it doesn't matter, but I was just like realizing, oh, maybe we should be changing that so it's correct since it is so wrong.
I guess we could go on the, she died in San Diego, was it San Diego County, I think, or Los Angeles County?
It was San Diego, so
San
it's like
Diego
Chula
County.
Vista
We
area.
could go on their website and see if it's possible to amend a death certificate. We could investigate it. Sure.
Okay, we also have another question. I had a relative who died in a CI, I guess, Central Islip State Hospital in 1905. How would I be able to find out where he is buried?
If you can't find his record on Find a Grave, you would have to get that death certificate. And if he died in 1905 in the town of Islip, that should be public information and available. You can probably find him on the New York State Death Index. You would be able to get his certificate number, and his death should be with the town of Islip if he died at CI State Hospital. He's not necessarily buried. There is a cemetery in CI. I'm very familiar with all that. I do another talk on the state hospitals, but not necessarily. The family may have buried him privately. I have a great grandmother who died in CI, so I'm pretty familiar with all that. But his death, you should be able to get his death certificate from the town of Islip. That is absolutely within the realm of public information.
Okay, and not quite about death certificates, but how do I find out if my ancestors came here on the Mayflower? I'm going to say research, research, research.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's totally off topic. Yeah, you'd have to, that's just off topic, and it's a lot of research.
Yeah.
But it can be done. It absolutely can be done.
I just want to scroll through and see if we got all the other questions. Anne said, I enjoyed how thorough your searches are. I think that's all the questions that I see. I think that is interesting about amending death certificates. I've seen so many, older death certificates of my ancestors, probably from the 1800s when they immigrated. And, you never know who filled out that death certificate. Was it, a coworker, someone they, you know what I mean? Someone they were, if they didn't have any other family members in the country to attest to who they were,
Yeah, and sometimes they don't always ask for an informant. I showed you an example where there was not an informant, was not one of the questions.
Right.
And sometimes when there is an informant, it's the hospital. It's, the only way they know about the person is from an admission record, which can sometimes be very incomplete.
Right.
If nobody else comes forward. And again, Heather, just to go back to your question of, proving identity, where they asked for your birth record, that when I was looking for my great grandmother's records, I had to supply, because my maiden name, my married name is not the same as her name was. and I had to supply 3 generations of basically birth, marriage, and death records to prove that I was her great-granddaughter. So again, if anyone's looking for a death record and they ask for all these relationship questions, which are getting tighter and tighter and tighter because of identity theft and privacy and HIPAA and all kinds of things that are regulated now. But it's not surprising that they ask for that, because I had to supply a whole chain of descendancy proof that I was her great-granddaughter.
Okay, I think that's everything. Let me just see. All right, well, it's okay. Well, if that's everything, I do just want to thank Rhoda again for presenting for us and from joining us from sunny North Carolina. And to thank everybody for coming, and we will see you soon on some future programs.
Okay.
All right, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you all for coming.